Hello everybody, welcome back to another 10-minute Marvel video. I'm Petter, and today CinemaCon is in full swing in Vegas, and, well, Sony had their panel last night. So I want to cover, obviously, the Marvel stuff from Sony's panel. First off, they spent some time on the next Spider-Verse movie. That is now set for a date in 2027. So we have to wait a couple of years for it to come out. They did talk some about that. They wanted like the animation to be bigger and more impressive. There were some images for it as well that looked great. They actually showed some footage for it, but this to me, I know people are like, oh, it's taking so long. They said they were going to have it well before now. This is actually coming out in a shorter time gap, I believe, if I remember correctly, shorter time gap than between the first and the second one. And this just speaks to the volume of animation and the detail of animation that they do. I wouldn't want them to rush it any faster because I want the animation to be as wonderful as it has been in the first two. So I understand, and I think that this is a situation where thankfully Sony is letting the directors do their thing, and they understand that it's animation. It is going to make them a bunch of money because it is a Spider-Man animation, but it's also still just an animation project. So I think they're a little bit more fine pushing it and being less hands-on with it, which is a good thing. However, the bigwigs at Sony definitely are the ones who set that original date for it that has then been pushed so many times that it looks bad. So that's the Spider-Verse news, and just a few thoughts on it. The bigger news, in my opinion, and what gets me more excited, is the Spider-Man live action news. We have a confirmation on it here. I'm going to pull up the details. So, Spider-Man 4, brand new day, coming out July 31st, 2026. So it's going to be filming later this year. Not a ton of details on it. Daniel Destin Crescent said that expect big things and different things from it. I mean, that was just like a very safe kind of generic answer for it. I do want to talk a little bit about the title or the subtitle for it, because Brand New Day is a comic book run. Now, I spent a little time last night researching what that comic run is about. And I think it's important to understand where Marvel will and will not pull from this comic book run for it. The general big idea of Brand New Day is that it takes place after kind of that memory wipe of the One More Day storyline, where Peter and MJ and Mary Jane are no longer married. Like, they've forgotten each other. Aunt May is still alive. Harry's just come back from Europe, not the Green Goblin, or Hobgoblin, Green Goblin, I think. But all of these things, bad things, have been undone because of the change in the deal that was made. And this was actually made and done kind of as a Marvel Comics decision that Peter in the mainline comics will never be married. That's kind of some of the, it's an important story beat kind of arc for him, is that he isn't. And so that was, I think, some of the reasoning behind it. Now, obviously, we had just had No Way Home. Not just. A few years ago, we had No Way Home. That adapted some of that One More Day storyline in terms of everybody forgetting who Peter was. His life that had previously happened is now changed irrevocably because MJ and Ned don't remember who he was, who is behind the mask. Happy Hogan doesn't remember who's behind the mask. Even Doctor Strange doesn't remember who's behind the Spider-Man mask. And he did that to keep people safe. Now, where I think it's going to differ is basically everywhere else. Honestly, it is going to differ a ton from the Brand New Day storyline in terms of the events that actually happen in the film. The big important part of the Brand New Day storyline is that Peter now has a new lease on life in a different way. It is not necessarily a good change, and in the MCU, Peter still remembers his previous life. He remembers everything that has happened. And so there's going to be this disconnect. I wonder if they're going to touch on it, like maybe fading, merging together with the new memories because of the spell, something like that. But I don't think they're going to do the same storyline where you had, trying to remember, the villain who popped up in there was kind of a new menace, I think, was the villain who Peter originally thinks is Harry's back into trouble, but it turns out actually not. It's Harry's girlfriend vouches for him, and that's enough for Peter. Of course, he maybe should have looked a little bit more into that, because he might have caught some interesting things. He works at saving the Daily Bugle, and Mary Jane is dating somebody new. Now, those are just kind of some of the big beats for it. Do I think we're going to get those things in this movie? No, I don't think so. Because, I mean, we don't have a Harry. How are we going to do that storyline? It's not like Harry can return and Peter now is like, okay, I'm worried about him becoming the Green Goblin. No, that hasn't existed. That hasn't happened for this Peter yet. And doesn't seem like it will happen at all because there is no Norman Osborn to start out with in the MCU. So instead, I think we're going to see a storyline that, I mean, we've talked about it before, but one where Peter / Spider-Man is living into a new identity of Spider-Man. And it feels a little bit repetitive, maybe to what we're seeing in Daredevil Born Again, but this idea of that temptation to take it a step further, to say like, oh no, I'm fine, like I'm behind a mask, nobody knows who I am, I can be tempted and give in to temptation to take it a step further because nobody knows who I am. Now, we could see something like that with it. I think we're also going to see a situation where it might be that, I mean, Peter has to figure out how to make it work on his own. He doesn't have a man in the chair anymore with Ned. He doesn't have Stark and Stark Tech behind him. He is going back to kind of the roots of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And that might mean that he has to find work, which might mean the Daily Bugle or something like that. He's going to be meeting new people, new characters, and forming new friendships as Peter, while trying to balance his desire and the temptation to try and recreate what he had before, knowing that risk. And I think I said he's going to make new friendships as Peter. I think he's also going to make new friendships as Spider-Man, which is what he's going to feel more comfortable with. The idea that nobody will know who he is behind the mask, which means that he really can keep those two things separate, and people who know him behind as Peter will never know him as Spider-Man, and vice versa, in really keeping that separate and hidden away, because that is one of the kind of key elements again from the comics that the MCU really didn't touch on, is this idea that Peter doesn't really ever reveal who he is behind the mask to most people. Maybe within the superhero community, but never really to the public, with the exception of the Civil War storyline. And I think we're going to see and kind of build off of some of that, where there's going to be this temptation for him to maybe go back to the way things were, to reveal who he actually is to someone, but maybe also pushing too far the opposite direction and keeping everything so separate that he gets caught up in that separation himself and fails to notice when things are overlapping in his regular life as Peter Parker going to college and his life as Spider-Man. But what do you think is going to be happening in Brand New Day? Let me know that down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this content, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click that notification bell to know when new videos come out. We appreciate everybody who are checking out the videos. Also check out the podcast as well. We have a 10-minute Marvel podcast. You can find that here on YouTube. Click onto the channel and then the podcast tab, or you can search for 10-Minute Marvel wherever you get your friendly neighborhood podcasts from. But with that, we'll see you next time.